Okay, the structure of neuron is something you have studied in your high school class or in your plus 2 class. So most of the features of a nerve structure you may be knowing, but we will recollect some of the important points. So if we look at a typical neuron, this is how the structure of a typical neuron will be appearing. Here you can see that there is a nucleus will be there. Then there is a what is called a long tail-like structure is there, which we call as the axon. And from the nucleus we have several projections which we call as the dendron. So this is the basic structure of a neuron. Now here if you look at the center, this main part of the neuron, this we call as a cell body. This entire structure which contains the nucleus is known by the name the cell body. Then we have a long tail which we call as the axon, and these structures are known as the dendron. Now if you examine closely, you can see that this dendron is having a tree-like or root-like branching and ending in a smaller endings, and this branching of dendron is known by the name dendrites. These are known as the dendrites. And similarly, if you look at the end of the neuron, here also you can find a small branching like or root like branching of the axon also. Then what we are seeing is that the axon is actually covered by a fatty sheet. That fatty sheet which is protecting the axon is known by the name myelin sheet. Here you can see that this is the myelin sheet. So, but if you look closely, you can see that the myelin sheath is not a continuous layer. There are breaks or gaps in this myelin sheath, and so that is how the myelin sheath is normally arranged. And these gaps in the myelin sheath are known by the name nodes of Ranvier. So, even though the axon is a long continuous tube, the fatty layer which is protecting it or covering it, which we call as the myelin sheath, is not a continuous layer. It is a segmental arrangement with certain breaks on breaks on certain intervals, which these gaps which or breaks are known by the name nodes of Ranvier. Then there is another important thing regarding is that the primary function of a neuron is sending or transmission of electrical signals. That is the main function of a neuron, and a neuron will be sending these messages from one nerve or one neuron to another neuron. And typically, if you look at the structure, you can see that these are the basic features of a neuron. Again, you can see that this is the cell body, and this is the nucleus, and this is the axon, and this is another large detailed diagram showing the myelin sheath, and also the nodes of Ranvier also you can see that. And this myelin sheath gets its protection or nutrients from another cell known by the name oligodendrocyte, and purpose of oligodendrocyte is to produce this myelin sheath and give the nourishment for myelin sheath. Then we have Schwann cells are there, and also the axon terminals are there. So going to the dendrites are branch-like structures extending from the cell body. Here you can see that these are the dendrites, and they are root-like branches which are coming out from the cell body, and their job or their function is to receive messages from other neurons. So normally neurons are connected with one another. So the messages which are transmitted by one neuron has to be received by another neuron, and that receiving function or that collection function is actually carried out by dendron or dendrites. Although some neurons do not have dendron, other types of neurons have multiple dendrites. So if you normally this is a typical structure, but not every neuron has a dendron like this. There are neurons which do not possess any dendron, but there are neurons which have more than one dendron also. Multiple dendrons will be present. Now dendrites have a small protrusions called dendritic spines, which further increases surface area for possible connection with the other. See, the end of this dendron will be having certain spine-like projection, which are called by the name dendritic spines, and their purpose is to also transmit the message, receive the message, and in a better way that will be increasing the surface area of the dendritic area. So these are the functions of dendrite. Now coming to the center part, that is a cell body. This is the cell body. Here also you can find this is a cell body. This entire structure is known as a cell body, also known by the name soma. So if you take the cell body or soma, the main part of the cell body is the nucleus. Here you can see this is the nucleus, and outside the nucleus there is a cytoplasm, and that cytoplasm will be filled with many cellular organelles, like this is the endoplasmic reticulum will be there, mitochondria will be there, Golgi bodies will be there, lysosomes will be there. So all the normal cell organelles which are present in a typical cell will be mostly present inside the cell body or inside the soma. Then we have the axon. So axon is the long, this is the axon, this is the axon. Now taking the axon, it is a long tube-like structure that carries electrical impulse from cell body to other neurons. So here there are two types of the function of dendron or dendrites is to collect messages from other neuron, whereas the function of a axon is taking this message which is produced by this cell to another neuron. One is receiving the messages, axon is sending the messages. So that is how the both axon and dendron are differing in their function. So axon is basically tube-like structure, and it will be carrying the electrical impulses or transmitting the electrical impulses to other neurons, which then pass to so this is how it is normally functioning. Then the cell body contains a specialized structure which we call by the name axon hillock, and which serve as a junction between the cell body and here you can see that here there is a conical projection, and that conical projection is known by the name axon hillock. Hillock simply means a small hill. So a small hill like projection is there, and because of that we are calling it as a axon hillock, and that is actually a junction between the cell body and the neighboring axon. So this is actually a junction which is acting as a specialized region for helping in the transmission of the impulses. So that is the axon hillock. Then we have synapse. Now regarding the synapse is basically a junction between two neurons. So that is the dendrite of one neuron and axon of another neuron will be connected with each other, and that portion is known by the name synapse. So that is the meaning of the word synapse. Synapse is a junction between one neuron and another neuron, or typically it is a junction between axon end of one neuron and dendron end of another neuron. So from axon the messages will be passing to the dendron. So that is the function of the synapse, and it is considered as a chemical junction because there is no physical connection. There will be a gap between these two neurons. There will be a physical gap, and that gap will be filled with a chemical known by the name acetylcholine, sometimes known by the name also known as neurotransmitter. So when one message is reaching this end, that message will be going into the what is called a synaptic gap. From the synaptic gap, it will be transmitted by the help of acetylcholine or neurotransmitter to the dendron of the next neuron. So this is how normally the chemical transmission of messages is going on, and this area between two neuron or junction between two neuron is known by the name a synapse, and it is basically a chemical junction. Now cell body also include many other structures are also there. Then Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, And these are the other cellular organelles which are present inside the cell body. Then what is the importance of the myelin sheath is that here you can see that this myelin sheath is basically a well protected structure, and it is mostly made up of fatty tissues. So what we will see, so some axons are covered with myelin, a fatty material that wraps means cover, a fatty material that is covering the axon to form the myelin sheath. Now, so based on the presence and absence of myelin sheath, we can divide axons into those with the myelin sheath called myelinated neuron, and those which do not possess myelin sheath as unmyelinated neuron. So there are two types of neurons, one with the myelin sheath and another without myelin sheath. And this external coating functions as an insulation to minimize the dissipation of electrical, because you know that when electrical wires are covered with a plastic coating, that is an insulating layer. In the absence of that plastic coating, what happens? Two neighboring electric wire will touch each other, and there will be the fuse will go. So that is what is happening in the ESOP. So in order to avoid that situation, all the neurons are actually covered with a protective layer known by the name myelin sheath that will be insulating. Insulating means prevent the transmission of messages to other neurons. That is the function of the insulating. And this external coating functions as a layer of insulation to reduce the spread of electrical signals to other neurons, or dissipation of electrical signals to other neurons. So myelin's presence on an axon greatly increases speed of current. So why this myelin sheath is present? One important advantage of myelin sheath is that normally, because of the presence of myelin sheath, the speed of the speed of transmission of messages, with how much speed the messages are going through an axon, that is actually increased. So normally it is like the messages will be jump from one nodes of Ranvier to another nodes of Ranvier. That is normally happening, and because of that, this kind of message transmission through axon is also known by the name saltatory propagation. Saltatory propagation, which simply means saltatory means jumping. So since myelin sheath is helping to increase the speed of message transmission, we have seen that the neurons which possess myelin sheath have a better efficiency compared to those neurons which do not have a myelin sheath. This insulation of myelin sheath is important, as axon from human motor neuron can be seen as long as 1 meter. That is the length of this axon in a human being. So the length of this axon in a human being can be up to this much, 1 meter. So that is the importance of this myelin sheath. So myelin sheath is actually helping in the insulation of messages. And this prevents any electricity from leaking out. So insulation is that and another point that we have to keep in your mind is that regarding the nodes of Ranvier, which are simply the gaps in the myelin sheath. These gaps in the myelin sheath are known by the nodes of Ranvier. So this is the details regarding the myelin sheath. So importance of the myelin sheath is that it is helping in the increased speed of message transmission. That is the advantage of myelin sheath. And neurons which possess myelin sheath have a faster rate of nerve transmission, and those which do not possess myelin sheath have a slower rate of message transmission. So these are some of the advantages of the myelin sheath. Here you can see that there are nodes of Ranvier is shown, myelin sheath is shown, then nucleus called Schwann cells is on each will be having a cell called Schwann cell will be there. Then neurolemma, the sheath of the Schwann cell is shown. So these are the different areas of the myelin sheath. Then another point is regarding the glial cell. Now glial cells is that the myelin sheath is not actually a part of the neuron. Neuron basically contains cell body, dendron and axon. Actually the myelin sheath is coming from another area. So myelin sheath is produced by glial cell. Glial cell, glia means coming from the word glue, which means glue, which are non-neuronal. This term you have to keep, non-neuronal cell. So myelin sheath is, this myelin sheath is produced by, these are the myelin sheath is produced by non-neuronal cell, and that provides support for the nervous system. So glia functions to hold the neurons in place, supply them with the nutrients, provide insulation and also remove pathogens and dendrites. So these actually this kind of cells which are covering the neuron is a protective cell, and which is helping in insulation and also providing nutrients and also removing the pathogens and neurons from the glial cell. So in the central nervous system, glial cells that form the myelin sheath are called oligodendrocyte. So here this is the myelin sheath, and those cells which are forming the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. Which are the central nervous system? Our brain and spinal cord are constituting the central nervous system, and those neurons which are present in all other areas of our body are known as a peripheral nervous system. So only brain and spinal cord are the central nervous system. So in the central nervous system or in the brain and spinal cord, the myelin sheath is produced by a type of cell, and they are known as a oligodendrocyte. So that is the type of cell that we can find in the myelin sheath. And in the peripheral nervous system, the cells which are producing the myelin sheath are known by the name Schwann cells.